Hi everyone, my name is Hamza and I'm the founder and organizer of PakDreamin. And I would like to welcome all of you to Pakistan's first community led Salesforce conference. Thank you so much for joining us. At PakDreamin, our vision is to elevate and support Salesforce community all over the world. Right now, our world is also battling a virus that is affecting the daily lives of billions of people. We want to thank the dedicated people everywhere, especially our healthcare workers who have made tremendous sacrifice to take care of those in need. I do request all of you to please get vaccinated if you haven't already. Pakistan Dreamin is all about Salesforce and for everyone, including newbies who are interested in joining Salesforce ecosystem, administrators who are already working and managing Salesforce instances in different organizations, developers who are using Salesforce tools to develop new functionalities and adding values to their business processes, and architects who are designing amazing solutions for their partners and elevating their businesses. I'm sure this Dreamin' event was a big dream for many of us, especially for the Pakistani community. We all have dreamt for this. And if you ask me, I had this dream popping up in my mind since the start of 2019 when I became the community group leader. And I'm so happy to living the dream. I would like to thank both of the co-leaders, Kurat and Badar, who did understand the vision and spent their many sleepless nights and workload to manage and make this happen. And to all our speakers who brought an awesome content and added the value to the event. To our volunteers who are having the drive to give back to the Ohana community. And our generous sponsors by which we could have made it happen. With that, let's get started by sending it over to Kurat. Kurat, over to you.
Thank you, Hamza. Good morning, everyone. Great to have you here today with us. As you can see, we have a lot to cover, so let's get started with our vision. Thanks to COVID, we are bringing this conference to you in a whole new way, straight to your homes and wherever you are, and we would like to welcome you to our home today here at Hopin. Because throughout history, greatest challenges have been met with great creativity and breakthroughs. That's why we are extremely excited today to bring this conference to you. There will be more than 50 amazing sessions with speakers from around the world, and there would be multiple Ask the Expert sessions with a panel of CTAs. Along with that, we would have a career fair for you to join in and explore different opportunities. And all of that would be delivered to you right from Hopin. So even though we are not together in person, but actually we are more together than ever through this conference today. Pakistan is a land where we have generated visionary people like Arfa Karim, Malala Yousafzai, and a lot more young, talented minds who have went on to make world records for for being professionals in different technologies. Our vision with this conference is to elevate and support the Salesforce community in Pakistan and around the world. We would also like to use this as an opportunity to upskill the women in Pakistan so they can also join the Salesforce ecosystem. And we plan to do this by bringing the latest and updated Salesforce knowledge to the community here and to people around the world. So, for more about Salesforce in Pakistan, I'd like to pass the mic over to Badr now. Thank you.
Thank you, Guru. Apologize. Um, so let me share some light on the tech industry in Pakistan. So we do have 50 plus companies in Pakistan working on Salesforce and have around 400 Salesforce professionals working on these firms. That's exciting. So Pakistan generates around 100 plus Salesforce professionals every year. So as we all know, Pakistan has world-leading freelance industry, and we have thousands of professionals working on different technologies, From this event, we are aiming to help at least 50 plus newbies to get started with Salesforce by providing quality content and continuous support. Today, we do have amazing speakers from all around the world, including the Salesforce MVPs and Golden Hoodies owner who are bringing wonderful content in 50 plus sessions. And we do have Peter Chittum with us. He is Senior Director, Developer Relations at Salesforce. Now, I would like to invite Peter for the keynote session.
All right, good morning, everybody. Now we're in business. Awesome. So good morning, PakDreamin. Assalamu alaikum. I'm super pleased to be able to come and share a little bit of my thoughts on the world of Salesforce developer. I'm extremely honored to have been invited by the organizers, Hamza, Kurat, and Badr. Thank you so much. And I think I was referred to you by someone I know here in the UK community. So I want to say a big thank you to everybody in the Salesforce ecosystem. One of the things that I find is amazing about working with the Salesforce ecosystem in my job is how strong the connections are with the community, with each other, and those of us who work with you as well. So thank you. There we go. A little bit about myself. I consider myself an accidental entrant into the IT world. It wasn't what I set out to do by my education, but I've been in enterprise software for over 20 years and 11 of those now as a Salesforce developer. Outside of work, I spend my time with my family primarily, and then mountain biking, music, travel as well when travel is more possible, but we know this past year has been a challenge for that. And then if I have any superpowers, I'd say one of those is to connect people. And another is that I have very long arms, so I never use a selfie stick. And you can see that in this slide here. And I've sort of preempted the thank you slide by thanking everybody in advance. But I feel extremely privileged to have been able to travel around and meet so many different people in so many different parts of the world as I've been able to do this job in developer relations. And I guess if there's anything that is a little bit bittersweet about this is that we're still in this period where it's so difficult for us to meet in person. And I've never been to Pakistan. I think it would have been amazing to meet some of you in person had that been possible. But at the same time, I do think it's amazing that in spite of all the difficulties of the past nearly 2 years, in some ways it's almost brought the world closer together in that we've all had to reach out virtually to each other and connect in that way. And I think Pakistan Dreaming is a great example of that. So with that, let's dive right in. I plan to talk about technology primarily, and from the perspective of the developer as well. I do want to talk about people and a little bit about my view of the developer community and what excites me about the developer community today. And then talk about a few challenges and some final thoughts at the end. I will make some forward-looking statements and talk about some products that haven't been released yet. So I do want to remind everybody that you should only make your purchasing decisions based on features that are currently available with Salesforce. So let's talk a little bit about technology. I've been in enterprise software, as I said, for a little over 20 years. And when I first really dove into enterprise software, what I found was something that was amazingly powerful. This ability to have a software package that had a baseline of functionality that could respond to business requirements, that you could integrate with other systems. And then every package that I worked with had some ability to configure it as well as some ability to customize it with code. So it really, I've been in this world of both clicks, as we say, and code for pretty much my entire career in enterprise software. However, 20 years ago, there were some big problems with enterprise software. And I won't talk about all of these, but probably the biggest ones were that the upgrade path was super uncertain. You'd get this package, install it, spend 18 months to 2 years implementing it, and then none of those customizations could be carried forward should you upgrade. And speaking of upgrades, major releases were often long periods of time, sometimes years between those major releases. There were other problems around proprietary things, not always following standards, and really more that there weren't as many standards to follow at the time. But I had my career, and then in 2010, I joined Salesforce. And for me, Salesforce was a massive revelation. First of all, some of those major pain points that I had experienced before had been solved by Salesforce. The clicks were super easy, and even though proprietary, it was very intuitive to learn how to go about doing those customizations without code. The forwards compatibility of Salesforce is something that I still think is amazing, that I can make changes of any sort to my Salesforce environment, and that seamlessly moves forward each time Salesforce has a major release. Salesforce has done a great job in adopting standards and using standards, particularly around integration. But I'll talk about some other ones in a moment here as well. And then the three release per year cycle with Salesforce keeps all of us on our toes. There's so much to learn every single time that there is a release. It is definitely, it's almost a full-time job to keep up with that, probably. Now in 2010, though, there were still a few problems around it feeling very proprietary, and there were new problems as well. For instance, having your production environment as the source of truth for changes, and the metadata API coverage was not great. Now, in that same period of time, there were a whole bunch of technology changes, and some of these were the technology itself. Some of them had to do with the way that we worked with the technology. Things like the Agile Manifesto and DevOps, for example, were practices that evolved that absolutely blew away previous practices as far as how people work together on projects. Git completely changed how we share code with each other. And things like jQuery and Node.js were transformative to languages that some people had considered trivial previously. JavaScript has really grown up and become a force that you cannot avoid if you're building enterprise software today. But again, still in 2010, it was not exactly straightforward how we could work with some of these things as developers. And so let's talk a little bit about how Salesforce has bridged that gap in the meantime. I think nothing has been more amazing than the transformation of front-end development with Salesforce. we entered the world of JavaScript open source with Aura and had a few years with that structure. But with the advent of Lightning Web Components, with the Lightning Web Components open source project, Salesforce has really moved in the direction of following the standards of front-end development. And in fact, though, we've really moved beyond just following the standards in that Salesforce now has employees, engineers who regularly meet with and sit on the WE3C and TC39 working groups. And so Salesforce is no longer just following those standards. Salesforce is investing in what the future of those standards will be for us. And for those of us who work in enterprise software, where things like security, or in the world of Salesforce, where we work in a multi-tenant environment, that creates certain requirements that are needed. Salesforce is now able to help influence those standards to go in a direction that mesh better with the sometimes complex and certainly very strict security requirements that come with enterprise software. And I think that bodes really well for all of us as developers. It's been great to see, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, the big investment that's been happening in Apex. And this is probably harder to feel as a Salesforce developer because there hasn't been an avalanche of new features. Really more, Apex has had a massive focus on stability. And I think the real watershed moment for that was in 2017 when we launched our new compiler. And that enabled us to implement features that had been long-standing pain points for a lot of developers. And since then, Chris Peterson, who actually he's moved beyond just the product manager for Apex, he's actually product leader for all the language services now. This was a quote from him in 2019, and I think he's done a great job leading Apex, and now I'm really excited to see what he does leading the whole language services team. The command line has been amazing. When I first joined, there was nothing like this. There were people who built it from the community, and I thought that was amazing, and I used some of those tools. But to have a fully supported command line that follows best practices, I think has changed how all of us look at our orgs. Being able to access and manipulate and make changes to my org via a command in my terminal, I think is amazing. Yeah. The thing that I'm really looking forward to coming up in the future, though, is that we've now launched as beta the unified CLI framework. And so more and more, we're going to be able to have one set of tools to work with any of the technologies that Salesforce put in front of us. So in the future, we could hope that we wouldn't have a whole bunch of different command lines. We would have one command line and then sets of commands for different domains, different features. So I think that's going to be very exciting. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where the tools team takes this. Speaking of tools, VS Code has been, I've really enjoyed getting to know this as a tool. And going back to this idea of standards and open source, I think, so this is from 2019. Actually, this might have been 2020, where if you looked at the top 10 GitHub projects by contributors, VS Code was at the very top of that list. And I think it's very reassuring for me as a developer to know that there are that many people looking at this project and wanting to make it better. It's a great tool to be a part of your tool set. The Metadata API has been slowly evolving, and then in the last few years, there's been a big uptick in the number of supported features by the Metadata API. And I grabbed this from a tweet that Andrew Davis from Copado pushed out there. I think this was 2020 before virtual Dreamin, because I thought, this is a great way to illustrate how the metadata API has been changing. And I did ask him for permission. I think he sent me a higher resolution graphic as well so that I could add this in here. So thanks, Andrew, for helping me out in that instance. But yeah, you can now check to see what is covered in the metadata in an online way. So you don't have to go leafing through the metadata API manual to try and find that thing. You can just look it up in your org to see if something is supported. And we're constantly trying to add to that. I think we in developer relations have done a better and better job of supporting you. And I think one of the important tools that I want everyone to be aware of is the vast number of code samples and SDKs that are available. In the relaunch of our website this year, we now have a single page where you can go and find all of those things. So anything that is a code sample or an SDK that came from Salesforce, you can go and find that in the code sample. And from a community standpoint, there's always been a strong connection with open source. I've always known people who were very active in open source in my time working as a Salesforce developer. I think what's really changed is that the number of open source projects that contain core features that you and I work with as Salesforce developers has really exploded. So again, some of the things that the Trailhead Apps organization is actually where we put a lot of our sample apps. At the same time, you can see there's the GitHub force.com org, where you can often see open source projects that have come from engineering, or sometimes github.com/Salesforce in the case of the Lightning Web Components project. And if you're looking for community projects, that last item on there, open-force.org, is a place, it's where there's a list of open source projects that's curated by the community so that you and I as developers can go and find and possibly contribute to open source projects as well. And I can tell you that inside of Salesforce, we talk more and more about how to find opportunities to help developers connect with and be active in open source. So keep your eyes out for that as well. Now, I want to spend a little bit more time on this, which is functions. Now, functions as a service is by no means a new technology. It's something that's been coming about. Gosh, I think I went to something called Lambda conference back, it's almost 5 years ago in London here. And so microservices, functions as a service, are meant to be single purpose, on-demand, short-lived microservices without complex infrastructure. Now, you'll probably have heard that Salesforce introduced what we called Evergreen at the time, but now what we're calling Salesforce Functions nearly 2 years ago at Dreamforce. And the idea of functions is to give people who are building solutions with Salesforce a new alternative way to execute logic. Something that can scale elastically, something that sits on infrastructure that you trust as Salesforce developers, something that will also give you flexibility. So you'll see that there are 3 different languages that we are showing as supported with Salesforce Functions: Java, JavaScript, and TypeScript. And then something that is going to live within the trust boundary of Salesforce and is easy to connect and configure. And that is really where functions is going to land, is something that will hopefully be as seamless to write, to deploy to a server, and then to execute from your org as an Apex class. Now, obviously, this has to sit on different infrastructure, so there will be some differences to how you do that. But we're trying as best as possible to get that developer experience right, so that it's very straightforward how you go from writing it to actually running it in your production environment. Functions are really going to fit some very key use cases because fundamentally Apex works. And if you just have basic synchronous, in particular, transaction logic that needs to be executed on record creates or record updates or deletes, things that are related to approvals, or just things that need to have executed directly off of a trigger, there's no reason to ever stop using Apex. Apex is not going away anytime soon. As I said, we've invested heavily in it, and you have all massively adopted Apex as part of what you do in your lives. So it doesn't make any sense to step away from that. Really, functions is to allow developers and allow projects to break out of a few use cases that weren't ever ideal for Apex. So do I need more processing power than I get in the shared multi-tenant environment of Salesforce? In that case, having something execute on an elastic infrastructure makes a lot of sense. Or have I built something in Apex, but I'm constantly pushing or reaching Apex limits? That is, again, another good use case to go ahead and see if that works in the functions context. And I don't have a lot of time this morning, but I just wanted to give a taste of what you can hope to see when functions comes to pass from the standpoint of like, what is the code going to look like? And I'm staying very high level here. Like I said, just giving a taste. I think a lot of people have seen the demos that we did when we first went into the pilot and we first announced functions with JavaScript. And you can see that that hasn't changed greatly, where your JavaScript module is going to export a function. It's going to take an event, a context, and a logger object, and then it's going to be able to execute some logic based on that. What might be new for a lot of people is, what is this going to look like if I'm going to write a Java function? And you can see here that it's a fairly straightforward Java class implementing a particular interface called Salesforce function. And once you implement that interface and override the method that is implemented in that interface, again, you get an event, a context, and a context object. And then you can go about the process of executing your logic. So there we go. So that's a high level of view of functions and what you can hope to see. I can't make any big announcements today, mostly because if you're aware, there's another big Salesforce conference coming up this week. So stay tuned. Hopefully there'll be some news coming your way for that, and also coming up in the near future. I do want to let people know, though, that just like we've been doing in developer relations in the past, we are going to support this again by having a set of recipes that you all can go and look at to see how do these functions work. So these are code examples that are trying to show best practices for using functions. And you can see that those are in that Trailhead Apps GitHub org. So if you're a new developer to Salesforce, or if you haven't found Trailhead Apps before, that is a great GitHub org to go and poke around in, look and see what's in there. There's a lot of great code samples and sample applications that you can go and use. So I guess I can say that the GA is coming soon. Stay tuned. And I think it's going to be really exciting as people go and try that out. Now, as I was preparing for this, I came across an old talk by Steve Jobs at the Worldwide Developer Conference, because One of the things that I wanted to spend some time on is just talking about the low-code world, as we say these days, and what it means to be a Salesforce developer that uses both code, but then the other tools to configure the functionality of your org. And this quote says, "The way you get programmer productivity is not by increasing the lines of code per programmer per day, but by eliminating the lines of code that you have to write. When you drag a line in Interface Builder, you're eliminating code of one form, but that only goes so far. Maybe we can go further." This was in response to a question about a developer who was practically begging Steve Jobs for more visual development tools. And I found it really ironic that there was a developer at Worldwide Developer Conference in 1997 asking for more visual development tools, when sometimes I hear from the community some frustration with visual development tools, or that sometimes you'll even hear outside of the Salesforce community that that's not development. So I found it really interesting that this is Steve Jobs basically saying, yeah, if we can make visual development work, we should do that. And I think some of the transformation that's been coming from the Flow team has been very exciting. They've been adding more and more features. And I think the focus that they announced recently by basically putting all of their energy behind Flow as the visual development tool for business logic for Salesforce, I think that's a great move. And I'm really excited to see more investment go in that direction so that that tool gets better and better for us as developers. Now, the thing that excites me about that sort of globally in the developer ecosystem is that a lot of other developers are catching on to this as well. So this was from the Software Engineering Daily podcast from the founder of a company called Webflow, which is a no-code website builder. And where he was saying, where he sees no-code taking us is that, not everybody wants to write code in text. And so having no-code tools can actually expand the number of people who are building software. And I love this. Mark Benioff a few years ago said something like 100 million developers. I love it how Vlad Magdalene here went and just up to the ante by several orders of magnitude and just going and saying, yeah, 1 billion people who are developing software. So I think that's really exciting to see where we go in that direction of no code and low code, but still developing software. I think we're getting there, and I think we'll get closer and closer as things progress. So I want to wrap up with a few things about developers, developer ecosystem, and then what I see are some challenges and some thoughts. I try and keep track of what's going on in the world of developers. These are some responses from the Stack Overflow developer survey and the GitHub developer survey, the State of the Octaverse survey that they do. And I think it's really interesting to see, what the distribution is. And if I look at that left-hand one and I see where Asia sits, knowing how many people live in Asia, to me, it feels like Asia as a region is a little bit punching under its weight. And if you look at the top countries as far as developers, I think, a lot of those we probably would say aren't unexpected. But again, there are some very large countries that aren't on that list right now. And, when I think of where growth is going to happen, it's always, where is there not saturation today, right? And this is a study back from 2019. So sure enough, if you look at where things have been growing, places like Pakistan that you can see there on that list, and Indonesia, which are very large countries, it seems like there's big opportunity for growth in countries like Pakistan. And that bears out in some of the numbers when you see how open source projects are growing. But, really we're about the people. So, going back a few years, if you look at where growth was happening, it's interesting to see, where the biggest growth is happening across different parts of the world. And this goes from left to right, 2019, 2020, and 2021 from the GitHub State of the Octaverse report. And I love the fact that I wasn't really looking for this, but in 2021, there's Pakistan. So this would be during the year of 2020 to 2021, Pakistan being one of the strongest growth points for contributors to open source projects. And where you have, again, where you have less saturation, you have opportunity for growth. And I think another way to look at this is from the Salesforce community itself in Pakistan. I tried to ask Hamza about this, and also Abrar, who was the one who connected me with the PakDreamin. And I tried to understand what the ecosystem is there. And people have shared with me that Pakistan was a little bit late to the game, joining joining the sort of IT economy. But when you look at the growth numbers of developers, and when you look at where you're at today, I think there's a great opportunity for the Salesforce ecosystem to grow as well in Pakistan. Pakistan is the 5th largest country, I think, by population. There are 10 groups in 3 cities. There are 3 developer groups, 2 admin groups, and 2 women in tech groups. So what that says to me is that if you're in the Salesforce ecosystem and you don't have a user group or a community group near you, it is an opportunity for you to start a community group. You all have it in your hands to grow the Salesforce ecosystem in Pakistan. And I'm really excited to see if this conference can also become kind of a focal point to help that growth happen. So, great job to the Pakistan Dreaming organizers for dreaming this up. I think I see a huge opportunity in Pakistan today. So a few challenges or opportunities. I think UI is still a pretty challenging place for new developers. If you come in and you are in a legacy project, there's lots of different things you could encounter. There are millions of Visualforce pages and still Visualforce pages being written. There are years of Aura. Then we have LWC as well. And we just launched Lightning Web Runtime. So one of the things that we're trying to do in developer relations is make sure that you all have tools to understand and work with these things. So even before we launched the LWC programming model, we started to try and help the community get better with JavaScript. We've been adding more Visualforce resources. And then most recently, Renee Winkelmeyer launched a series on Lightning Web Runtime and Experience Cloud. So take a look for those tools. Use the Salesforce developers website because we have a lot of things out there for you to use. And use those sample apps in our YouTube channel because, as the pandemic has changed everything for us, virtual has meant really investing in the amounts of the video content that we're pushing out there for you. I think there's a big opportunity, with the change in user interface, with the change in technology and functionality for Apex, with the launch of functions, with flows. There was a real interesting, if you watch the admin release readiness webinar recently, the product manager, Dana, talked about a best practice of small granular flows. So I think it's really interesting that we have a lot of new opportunities for architectural patterns to be developed around these new models that we've been introducing. And I'm really excited to see what the community is going to be sharing about that. If you're interested in that level of knowledge, I would check out the Architect's website at architect.salesforce.com. They are always looking for contributors to share architectural information with other architects. So definitely reach out there. And then as far as the future, I think the language improvements that we've seen around Apex, the new languages that we're seeing on the horizon, with functions. I'm expecting more and more of that coming in the future. I think tooling, again, we now have the unified CLI, and like I said, I'm really excited to see where that's going to take us as developers and how we're going to be able to interact with our Salesforce environments. And I think that's going to be especially interesting to understand how heterogeneous Salesforce implementations are going to be hopefully easily accessible from command line tools in the future. And I think there's going to be ongoing evolution of where and how we code. I don't have a lot of forward-looking thoughts about Slack today because we're still trying to understand what it's going to mean for Salesforce and Slack to be together as one company. But I'm really excited for the opportunities there, and I can't wait to see where we take that as well. One question that I'm often asked when developers come to me, especially younger developers, is what should I learn? Really, and I've been saying these things for years, but I think the general advice is pretty much always the same, which is you can never lose by learning modern languages and learning modern tools. And certainly Salesforce is going more and more in those directions every year. So even if you're invested in the Salesforce ecosystem, these things will also be good for you. Yeah. And the reality is, if you think about what the future is, it's really you. Each and every one of you who've come to this conference has shown that you're invested in growing the Salesforce ecosystem and being a part of the Salesforce ecosystem. I've been seeing people popping on and sharing notes from all over the world, from the US to New Zealand, as well as Pakistan, India, Europe. Anytime I see a smaller community, I always see opportunity. So with this conference as kind of a point to jump off from, I can't wait to see what it does for the Pakistan Salesforce community. And again, I just have to wrap up with saying, you're the ones who can help grow this community. And I share these pictures of I would say, one of my friends in the community, Hussam Saudi, who's in Morocco. And he's always, I think he's somebody that everyone should see as a role model because he was very active in the Morocco community. He was running the Casablanca developer group. He was going around to present to other places in Morocco, eventually started traveling to other parts of Africa. And then he also organized North Africa Dreaming. So the organizers, Hamza, Karat, Butter, you're following in the steps of a lot of other people who've done this as well. And it's fantastic to see you doing this. But I'm also excited to see is who are the next ones of you in Pakistan that will help grow the community further. And with that, I'll wrap up by saying thank you one more time. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy meeting each other. Enjoy lots of learning. And once again, very honored to be permitted to open up this conference.
Much, Peter, for joining us and for the wonderful session. That's we cannot thank you enough, and it's a pity that we cannot hear more about the new announcement that we're going to hear in the Dreamforce. But thank you so much for sharing some of them, and we are excited with the Slack and what we have shared already. So thank you so much again, and to all our attendees, thank you so much for joining. And we are going to have our session started at 11:30 a.m. Pakistan time. So go and get your knowledge. You know the share. Thank you so much for joining. And here's the winner announced for our Twitter game. So is Argan. Thank you so much and congratulations for winning the swags. Our team will reach out to you to get more details out of you. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, everyone. Bye.